Project 2, Section 1. In American society, the ideas of the American dream, advertising, and violence in mass media, economic censorship, and assumed gender roles have shaped the fundamental ways Americans perceive pop culture. Let's start off with concepts of the American dream. We all know about the American dream. At a young age, we are taught what the American dream means, but over time, our perceptions of it change. Common idea of the American dream is thinking that if I go to college and I work hard, I will achieve the American dream. A rags to riches story. We have learned that the American dream never really existed on paper, but we created it. It is told through our pop culture. We watch movies and read books with the American dream ideas to inspire and compel us to go to school, get a great job, get married, and have kids. An interesting idea of the American dream that it is rooted in consumerism. We want to be able to buy new trendy things for ourselves and family. We have all this pressure on ourselves to be successful and live up to this concept of the American dream. There's a clip that we have watched in lecture where we talked about how the American dream means different things to different people. Yes, we already have that over fundamental concept of the American dream, but each person's dream is different for each person. American culture and advertising is rooted in consumerism, social status, and fitting into the status quo. The American dream makes us consume media or buying certain things for our social status. Consumerism revolves around us being guilted into buying to show off or fit in. As humans, we have the need for social acceptance and the need to stand out. Economic censorship and violence in our mass media goes hand in hand. We know that most of our censorship that happens is about our human anatomy on movies or for songs, for example. For that means that it is not the literal content of the work that is being disputed, but what it represents. The censorship in films first began with the Hays Code from 1934 to 1968, and it was forced by Hollywood because of threats from the government. The Hays Code meant that there was no profanity or crime, for example, but that all changed with the MPAA film rating. This meant that a random group of people would watch any given movie before it came out and then rated it. If it was rated NC-17, then that means the movie would not get promoted as much and force economic censorship. The movies that were getting rated were often filled with too much sexual experiences that happened in the film. In the film we watched called This Film Is Not Yet Rated, talked about how movies that were 17 were most likely not going to be shown in theaters if kept in the original cut. The movies that were getting rated this were often filled with too much sexual experience happening in the film. If the film that we watched called, oh my gosh, where we were? In the film that we watched called This Film Is Not Yet Rated, talked about how movies that were NC-17 were most likely not going to be shown in theaters if they kept the original cut. If the directors decided to take out the graphic nature of the film that made it NC-17, then it could be brought down to an R-rated rating, which meant it would be featured in movie theaters. But economic censorship mostly deals about sex, not really about violence, though, because violence never really gets censored. In music, there's something called Parents Music Resource Center that was created in 1985 because parents were scared of song lyrics that could influence bad behavior on their children. This is why we have parental guidance, explicit lyric labels on albums to warn of explicit lyrical content. With violence in the mass media, we have become numb to watching any graphic, violent films or shows. But watching the clip Psycho, that was filled with graphic violence in the 1960s, was rather dull for today's standards. It has become easier to watch this when it's not really realistic, and this makes us desensitized to it. Since it never really gets censored, we become more accustomed to it over time. That's why older movies really have no effect on us. Assumed gender roles have been in our society forever. Gender codes is a cultural constructed belief that it defines appropriate roles and behavior from women in society. It has become the framework for how we experience the role. And gender is an overall constructed idea that we created. A common gender role is that women are good for cleaning, cooking, and take care of children. That has always been expressed in TV or movies like the Honeymooners sitcom clip, where the husband was saying how the wife is good for cleaning, cooking, and how she was not allowed to take dance lessons. Then, after that, he becomes angered that he only got a cold salad for dinner and not a hot meal. These shows reinforce the ideas of gender norms. This goes hand in hand in cultivation theory, in which we are exposed to something over and over and we start to think that it's the full truth. We start to see the TV shows and movies talk about how woman only stays at home and takes care of the children, and that the man is the total breadwinner for the family. This coincides with the American dream, since many people want to be able to have a great job and be able to support the family. Section 2. I decided to do the Family Guy episode, Season 3, Episode 3, called Mr. Griffin Goes to Washington. Let's start off with rhetorical perspective. Signs and symbols. So, even in the beginning of the episode, the theme song, which we have already talked in class about, has poked fun at American social norms. In this episode, Lois walks into Stewie, and Stewie has a room full of guns. I mean, the sign being that America recently has been filled with people wanting to get guns. And another one being that you can obviously tell from the video of like their home is often classified as middle class, and how Lois is often the one preparing the meals and cleaning up after the family. In this episode, Peter's company is bought out by a cigarette company. Because of this, there are many references throughout the episode to the shady business tactics used by the tobacco industry, which is part American culture, especially in the time of black and white television, which is something they allude to in a cutaway gag. Another signs and symbols is different American icons that was featured when Peter had to go to New York, and there was like a show like Broadway, the Statue of Liberty, and Empire State Building, just to name a few. Another kind of more, I would say, like a symbol would be I'm Just a Bill sequence. I'm Just a Bill is a popular schoolhouse rock that many of us know, like that remember it from 8th grade history class. It's often played. And they parodied it. Narrative analysis perspective, which is the moral of the story. The moral of the story was to work hard and maybe you would move up to become president of your company. But the company was also kind of shady to try to promote cigarette use. At the end, he made the right decision to leave the company. Dramatist! What is a rule-breaking behavior and why do we forgive them? Peter does these bad things, but we forgive him because he is supposed to be an idiot and does these things to be funny. Like he treats his family and wife badly, but he still loves them. Like when he lifted his wife's shirt in hopes they would get on the jumbotron at the Red Sox game, but we forgive him because he's goofy. The Marxist perspective, which is a common sense on why we have cultural assumptions that we have the status quo. Man makes money, mom stays at home. Smoking is a cultural norm in some countries. Even in our society, smoking has played a big part in what we do with friends and family. People often are led to peer pressuring by others to fit in the status quo to smoke and have a good time. Feminist perspective. Focus on the assumed normal rules for men and women in society. How Meg got less ugly when an uglier girl by the status quo stood next to her. In this scene, Meg was at school and a random girl came up to her saying that she was paid to stand next to her because she was uglier than her. Then all of a sudden, a boy came up to Meg and started talking to her because an uglier girl stood next to her. This is viewed as how beauty is a big part of social norms for women in society. If they're not beautiful or look a certain way and act a certain way, then they are left off to the side. This is why the boy started talking to Meg, because she was seen prettier compared to the girl standing next to her.
Well, then what about that graph on the wall that says the first thing we want is to get kids to start smoking?
That? Oh, that's just something my son made me in art class.
Huh. Well, then what about that post-it? It says the graph was not made in art class. We really do want kids to start smoking.
Section 3. My ideas of the American dream has always been shaped by what I saw on TV or at the movies or what was happening around me. One main example I could think of was that my grandma was born in the 1930s from Central California, where the American dream was thriving ideals. Once she got older, she was able to leave and move to Long Beach, and she was able to get a job at the Navy sign-up office where she met my grandpa. She has been able to create a better life for herself and her family since then. This also addresses gender norms, where even in the 60s, my grandma defined the norms and got a job and had a job until she was around 60 in order to support her family. An example of recent pop culture would have to be the movie Don't Worry, Darling. Well, spoilers ahead. In the film, Alice Chambers, played by Florence Pugh, is married to Jack Chambers, played by Harry Styles, in what looks like 1950s. Jack and the other men in the community work for a secret project. The women conform to assigned gender roles and are expected to cook, clean, and do activities to keep them busy, like ballet, swimming, or shopping. Living up to the idea of the American dream where a man comes home with a paycheck. The twist in this film is that the world is make-believe and the men are controlling the women to live in this world and keep them prisoner. Alice finds out she was a doctor and Jack was a computer person in their real world. She loved her job, but Jack wanted to live in the 50s to be in control of her and the world. The idea of the single story and cultivation theory comes into play when Jack wanted to keep her in this made-up world where he was in charge and make money to support this dream life. The single story being that he wanted to live in this American dream ideal life and believed that this was the only thing that would make him happy, with no regards to how Alice felt or her opinions. What? I'm trying to figure out how to end the video. Thank you for watching my video.